Hey there, good evening. Nice to see you. It's time for the Bronx Buzz. This is BronxNet's program where we talk to reporters, writers, journalists, other people who put stuff out in the Bronx so you can find out what's going on. In our second segment today, under that category of people who put stuff out, we talk to artists and performers. And this evening, we're going to talk to a Bronx artist who works out of Yoho, Yonkers, as a matter of fact. Nonetheless, let's get started with the senior state politics reporter from City and State New York. It's Rebecca Lewis. Nice to have you with us, Rebecca.
Thanks for having me back on.
Rebecca, you have really been, as far as I'm concerned, a godsend to at least help us understand what's going on in Albany. What happened with the state budget? It's due April 1st. We did have on time budgets with Governor Cuomo, but with Governor Hochul, we were now almost a full month late. Why did that happen?
There are any number of reasons that we could say, but really it's because Governor Hochul uh, wanted to get what she wanted to get. And for her, that means for Governor Hochul, and she has said this many times, a late budget is better than a bad budget. And so, as long as we don't reach a point where critical services are no longer getting funded, if we don't reach a point where schools don't have their funding, nonprofits don't have their funding, most people probably won't necessarily notice
Ah.
a late budget, even by a month. And the governor viewed this as a victory. So it was part of her negotiating tactics, best as I could tell.
It's very interesting to hear you say that because, people like me or others who follow would say, oh my goodness, it's late again. Can't you do? But you're saying, since nothing was defaulted on and nothing didn't happen as a result, not that it's no big deal, but at least it got done. Um, let's just roll through it. I say roll through it because you wrote an article which basically explained to all of us what made it into the 2024 New York State budget. And we also have to credit Chantel Destra, who's the associate state politics reporter, because she assisted in the article, right? I'm sure you agree with
Yep.
that. Um, but let's start in with what many people thought was a very big sticking point, and that was bail reform. Your note was that bail reform was in, but it wasn't the complete ask that the governor had. Why don't you help us define what happened?
Yeah, so bail reform was definitely one of, if not the biggest sticking point. It was the thing that was holding up the budget for a couple weeks after the deadline, at least, a week and a half. And the governor had originally made a proposal to remove the least restrictive means standard. So, opening up for a judge to impose bail or other pre-trial conditions for serious offenses, not necessarily what would be considered the quote unquote least restrictive one. Although part of that, whether it was by design or by mistake, it's still sort of up for debate. She removed in her proposal the definition of bail as a means to return to court, which was added to the state law back in the 70s and was a pretty landmark criminal justice reform. That was the last time that the state really debated including a dangerousness standard, and they rejected that in favor of saying the only thing that bail can be used for is to ensure that someone returns to court. And her original proposal, again, whether intentionally or not, removed that standard, and that really had a lot of criminal justice advocates and public defenders uh, pretty upset. It would have rolled back a decades old law, and so the final version that passed was it's a little bit more complicated than her original proposal, which was basically like a single paragraph in the state law. This, what ultimately was part of the budget, was more detailed in so much that it removed the language from every single part of the law and replaced it with, I believe, very similar language that a lot of Democrats, at least moderate Democrats, more moderate Democrats, have said doesn't change too much.
Right. And the big thing was discretion for judges to make, decisions on people who come in front of them. The big question to me is, if I'm sitting out there in the general public, why are we talking about this during the budget? I mean, in other words, is it really a financial thing? And it seems to me the governor was trying to burgeon her criminal justice credentials in including it in this, despite the fact that it was very controversial and it really might have been one of the reasons the thing was held up for so many days.
No, that is absolutely correct. You'd have to, ask Andrew Cuomo, ask George Pataki. They're the ones who kind of started this. Really, it was Cuomo, but it goes back. It does go back even further to George Pataki. The idea of including policy in the budget. This is where the governor has the most institutional power. So, especially we saw under Andrew Cuomo, and now we're seeing under uh, Governor Hochul, is using the vast institutional power that they have in the budget process to get
Yeah,
large parts of their policy agenda done, even if it
right.
has nothing to do with, fiscal issues.
We're not going to have enough time to roll through everything. I'm just going to pull out a couple. Another thing that did not pass, which many Bronx elected officials were for, was the taxing of the wealthy. And that didn't happen. Many people see this as a good source for finances to, do things that they want to do. That didn't make it. It was a surprise to me. You've got a Democratic-controlled legislature and governorship. They couldn't push that through.
The governor has said that she did not want to raise taxes. That was on anyone. She didn't want new taxes. She didn't want to raise taxes. She is, in that sense, very much a fiscal moderate to, more kind of fiscally conservative in that particular regard. Certainly, progressives wanted to see increased tax rates, income tax rates on the wealthiest New Yorkers. Something of a compromise. The governor did include in her own proposal, and it made it into the final budget, an extension of the higher corporate tax rate, first approved in 2021.
Mhm.
So that was expected to potentially be a fight, but the governor, included that proactively, and that did make it in. So it was a continuation of a tax that was going to sunset. But the new bill, the new taxes, the legislative leaders too, they said, there is not a need right now for all this new revenue. We don't need these new taxes, so it didn't make it in,
Didn't make it
although
in.
New York City is getting a slightly higher commuter tax, payroll mobility tax to help pay for
Right.
the MTA.
And we'll also get, it looks like congestion pricing. That'll be for another day.
Yes.
That looks like it's moving forward. I want to make sure that we don't depress everybody. There were some things that I think people would appreciate. There was SUNY and CUNY tuition hikes were thrown out so that will stay secure. Also, more funding for the MTA was a good thing. Your comment was sort of. Why don't we just talk about, because we are going to get 5 bus lines that are going to be free throughout the city. It's unclear which one in the Bronx yet. What's your thought about MTA funding? They did. I thought they had a good vision about the importance of it.
Yeah, there were other proposals for funding the MTA that came out of the legislature. Ultimately, a pared down version of an increase to the payroll mobility tax is what made it in. Originally, the governor had proposed an increase to, I believe, 0.5% across the entire MTA region. Now, the final budget the increase only applies to New York City, not the surrounding suburbs, and it is an increase to 0.6%, the rate. So it's, New York City's requirements to chip in is far less than what the governor had originally proposed. So it definitely has more funding, but it didn't go quite as far as some lawmakers and even legislative leaders in their one house proposals wanted to see. And that also comes back to some of the taxing the rich. Would have liked to have seen some more uh, money for the MTA coming from there. And also, and this made it in from the governor's proposal as well, some of the revenue from downstate casino licensures is going to go towards the MTA, when originally many
Right.
lawmakers wanted that to go exclusively towards education funding.
The governor made a big pronouncement about her plan to build 800,000 new homes. That didn't kind of, make it all the way through. I was wondering, did her optimistic plan sabotage the ability to get other housing legislation through, like good cause evictions and other things? Seems to me they spent a lot of time negotiating that and didn't have a chance to negotiate some things that certainly Bronxites would be interested in.
It's everything in Albany is, I'm sure is three-dimensional chess. And just
Well,
because
this is
someone
why
says
we
they want,
rely on you all the time, because you let us know about all that stuff. Yes.
the governor did not want good cause. She's made it clear that, her proposal was her proposal and it did not include good cause. Good cause is not universally accepted in the legislature either. There are debates about what killed what. Was the pushing for a good cause what caused Hochul to
Oh,
uh, give up on housing completely? Was housing used to kill the good cause fight? It's uncertain. There are many progressive lawmakers who said no housing in the budget without good cause, and that's what happened. No housing in the
yeah.
budget. There's no good cause, but there's no housing either. So it's people that I've spoken to think that perhaps the governor had a slight miscalculation about how much pushback she would receive from the suburbs for her housing plan, and decided to cut her losses in favor of other priorities like charter schools and uh, bail reform, which she got. She was able to get 14
Right.
charter schools for New York City, which isn't nothing if you know anything about the charter
Even
school
though,
scene.
let's face it, she wanted like 100, not necessarily for New York City, but she wanted that through the state. Anyway, it was a compromise from top to bottom. The next time we talk budget, we'll do a 3-hour show, and then we'll be able to break down every item. But your writing at City and State New York is just so important to us. And we appreciate your time this evening. I'm looking at the long list. We did well with natural gas and building public renewables. Education funding did well, according to advocates. Plenty to talk about, and that's why we are so thrilled to have access to Rebecca Lewis, who does a great job as the senior state politics reporter for City and State New York. Thank you so much.
Thanks again for having me on.
Okay, we'll see you around town. We're going to take a very short break, and when we come back, we'll switch gears. I'll put a different hat on, and we'll talk to a Bronx artist. Don't go away.